Right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this. This is actually our third in our current series of webinars for this year. The topic this time is architecture, engineering and construction in the metaverse. Now, you've probably heard a lot about the metaverse in the media and related concepts like digital twins, even with Facebook changing its name to Meta to try and get in on the trend. So, well, if you are wondering what all this means, our speaker today, Martin McDonnell from Edify, is here to explain and demystify these terms, especially in the context of our industry. Martin is the co-founder and chief executive of Edify, and he's going to talk about some real projects which demonstrate how Edify is launching into the remote immersive learning space. Now, after his talk, we will have some time for questions, so please type your question as succinctly as you can into the chat window, which you can open by clicking on the speech bubble icon, which will be somewhere on your main screen. This presentation is being recorded, so if you want to review the talk again, you will be able to do so. So, now I will hand over to Martin.
Thank you very much, Jeremy, and thanks for having me along to speak today. It's a real pleasure. I love doing these things and particularly look forward to the Q&A at the end. I'll try and talk for maybe 30-35 minutes and leave plenty of space at the end. I am just going to share my screen. Switch in here. And can you see my slides there, Jeremy, okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'll do a short introduction to myself, where I've come from, I guess just to give you some context, and then we'll dive into all things metaverse and some subjects around that. So once upon a time, a long time ago, I started my first business, Solus, in 2000, and I'm sitting within the Solus office in Glasgow at the moment, where Edify now share the headquarters space here. We founded the business 2000, it's grown up to be 40 staff, and really Solus's business is producing high-end CGI for the property sector, everything from the AEC around architecture, engineering, construction, collaboration, through to construction, and then real estate sales, as it's often called, all the stuff around marketing. Within Solus, maybe more than 10 years ago, maybe 11 years ago now, we started adopting games engines. So instead of just using the 3D rendering that we've got used to, 3D Studio Max, etc., we adopted, very early adopters of games engines. We actually produced a kind of, probably these days you would maybe call it a digital twin of the Gatwick South Departure Lounge in 2010 in the Unity games engine, and then went on to adopt the Unreal games engine and have used both ever since. So at Solus, I guess I've always been a geek, you know, I was a geek boy from the 80s and 90s, definitely a computer gamer, studied architecture at Strathclyde Uni, but I've always had that passion for tech, and I believe I've always cared about how you can usefully apply technology, and of course it's quite easy to get sucked into, you know, just the bells and whistles of it and the kind of fun and games, the wow factor, which is cool, has its place. But the real usefulness to me has always been a fascination. So I started a new business, Sublime, with some co-founders in 2017. And the purpose there was to develop our own technology in VR and AR, so virtual and augmented reality. We won 2 large-scale Innovate UK grants, around about £1 million each, and they funded several years of R&D into that space, and I'll cover some of that R&D today. I've got a few videos at the end just show you some outcome from that. And there were 2 programs. The second of them we called Augmented Worker, which was creating tools and effectively a platform for AR glass, so the kind of thing you would see, or you might imagine are safety glasses, but that give a digital overlay. So that R&D is well advanced. Actually, we have working prototypes. The challenge there is that the hardware is not quite ready. And when I get into talking about the metaverse shortly, I'll talk about the various pillars, technology pillars of the metaverse that are required to enable it. And one of those that's definitely missing for AR, for the glasses, is the hardware itself. just about everything. Well, everything else is there. The gaming platforms create 3D worlds and 3D objects. We and others have developed tools and use cases. There's a customer base, R&D and departments, innovation teams, and most of the large construction and consulting firms have been dabbling in this space for quite some time. What we all need is the hardware to come along. The second R&D program was called Project Mobius, and that was looking at VR as a learning and training medium. It was in partnership with the University of Glasgow, and that's just coming to a close now in terms of the 3-year R&D period. But about 18 months ago, at the front end of the pandemic, we had been doing some traded business in the Middle East, in particular large-scale construction projects. However, it was clear that we already had, even only halfway through the R&D for Mobius, we already had a useful set of tools and a useful platform for using VR as a learning and training medium. So we launched that last year, and we've then gone on to grow that into largely the education sector at the moment, higher education. However, probably for the last 3 or 4 months, we are now beginning to onboard AEC clients, particularly around the concept of digital twins, or the idea. I mean, there's loads of phrases here, probably too many bits of sort of terminology, but a digital twin can be many things. Again, I'll have a go at some definitions shortly. But for us, often the early stage is, you know, a descriptive twin, it's sometimes called, or a design twin, where really all we're doing is using a games engine to have a real time, a walkthrough, as you would in any of the games that we play on PlayStations, etc., where you can run around with a games controller. You can walk through the entire project before it's built and potentially peel away layers, look at things over time, so look at 4D time sequences, etc., etc. So that ability to do that in real time is something that we've started to deliver into the AEC sector. So I should say the VR for Learning and Training project Mobius that was R&D within Sublime has now been spun out as an entirely separate business, Edify, and we've raised some investment. We're scaling very fast at the moment. We're nearly at 60 staff. We're hiring to have 60 staff probably by early next year, but we were 30 about 2 months ago. So we're trying to double in size in as short a period as possible, and then open up into various sectors, particularly in the Middle East, but Southeast Asia as well. And that kind of international outlook has come quite naturally to us. One of my co-founders, Chris, has lived and worked in Taiwan for many years. He's originally the same as me from Glasgow, but has worked out there, speaks Mandarin, and has that kind of international outlook. So that's something, I guess, quite unique for us as a Scottish business, is that we're international by default and almost international first. I think that'll do for an intro. Let me dive into some more interesting stuff. So I will largely talk about the metaverse today. I wrote the title for this. I'm actually delivering a similar talk at Digital Construction Week this week in London, where we've been, I think, every year since it started. However, I wrote both this and that title many weeks before Facebook did their thing, and I think we've begun to see, is it an arms race? I don't know, is it a PR race maybe? But this massive explosion in discussion, at least around the metaverse, and it makes it a little bit problematic because we can all get drowned in the noise, and it's now probably even more easy to dismiss as a fad, as a tech thing, whereas I think I'll try and explain why I think it's quite a lot more than that, and it's more significant than that, it's more fundamental than that, and it is important. I think it's very important as businesses, particularly in our sector, in the AEC space, to understand what's coming and how we maybe need to shape up, and I think also where we have a head start on many other industries. So I'm going to largely talk around other people's work here, other people's research, and if you're going to read anything, I would go and read some of the stuff from Matthew Ball. He's a VC, so he's an investor. He has a kind of decent track record. However, a few years ago, he wrote his first essay on the metaverse and has gone on to update that and keep that updated. I think this is now a 9-part essay with, I don't know, 30,000 words across every area or every aspect of the metaverse. In his view, I'm not saying he's right, and I'm not saying, you know, all of his takes are spot on, but it's really clearly written with some great references out to things that are happening elsewhere, and I certainly use it as a kind of touch point. So I'm actually going to use a bunch of his kind of structure to talk about the metaverse, and then that link's there for anyone that wants to go and read it deeply. It's my kind of bedtime reading. I'm not sure it's for everyone, but yeah, nine essays here. So this is again, he openly says, you know, that it's an evolving definition. Maybe what I shouldn't, but let me say first, I think the metaverse and digital twins should not be considered, I don't know, a technology. They shouldn't be considered a platform. They certainly shouldn't be considered a product that you buy or that you go to a company to use. And of course, I guess the Facebooks and others of this world will try and position it a little bit differently. Although, to be fair, they're on record, Zuckerberg and others are on record saying the metaverse is a concept, not a thing that you buy. So I think that's maybe something to hold on to as an idea, is that the metaverse is kind of like saying the internet. You don't buy the internet, it's not a product, it's a thing, it's a concept that then has various components, which I guess has now become, entirely has become and built into the fabric of everyday life. And I guess that's what most people, I think, who talk about the metaverse now, see that as this future piece, this thing that's coming, has started to arrive. And again, loads of ways to think about it. A 3D internet isn't a terrible way to think about it, it's a lot more than that. But it's the idea that it's all around us, we're able to tap in and use it in the way that we use the internet, but it's 3D and spatial. Let me read, I won't read too many of my slides, but I'll read this one. So the metaverse is a massively scaled and interoperable network of real-time rendered 3D virtual worlds. So 3D worlds, very like games, you know, it might look and feel a bit like a game, but usually for a non-games purpose. It can be experienced synchronously and persistently. So synchronous means we all see the same thing at the same time, whoever's in there, whoever's in, again, think of multiplayer games. Persistence, super interesting, particularly for AEC. So the idea there is if you do something in a virtual world, let's say if we took a virtual replica of the building I'm in today, and I wanted to leave some maintenance notes, I'd noticed a leak or a light bulb or whatever, I could drop virtual post-its around the office, and it's persistent, so it stays there. Someone else can come along and through a device will see my post-its and my notes, and they'll persistently live there. And of course, then we can keep a history of those and start to build up that information. So persistence is really interesting. Effectively unlimited number of users. So we're talking about a decentralized web implementation here. Again, decentralized means it's on many computers at the same time. It's very resilient. An individual sense of presence. Been talking about presence for a long time. That's the idea that when you are in the metaverse, you feel like you're there. You want to reach out and touch things with your hands. When you talk about it afterwards, you say, when I was in that building, or when I teleported to Paris and I did it. You talk in the first person often about having been there, and that, I guess, comes from the sense of presence. Continuity of data. I'll talk a little bit about formats and standards shortly, and such as identity, history, entitlements, objects, communications, and payments. So the idea is that all of these aspects of life are held in a digital form, and you carry them around with you, or they move from world to world. Okay, I won't overdo this now, but persistence I've covered, synchronous and live I've covered, ton of users, so it really should be open. I mean, the internet is almost unlimited in terms of the number of people that can use it at the same time. It's not like, I don't know, a Teams call where the cap might be 100 or 250 because a server might run out of bandwidth or something. It's not that, it's a decentralized piece, very like the internet. The economy one's probably the one I'll skip. It's the thing I know least about, and it's the bit that I haven't quite got my head into in terms of, particularly for our industry, what element of economy will we likely see in the near future? Will payments take place? Will there be transactions? Will value be exchanged? In our industry, I'm not sure, and I'll probably just skip out of that one. Interoperability of data, I'll get to in some detail. So this little diagram, I think, is pretty helpful. Again, Matthew Balls. So the idea is that there are these kind of 7 key pillars and then this overarching piece around user behaviours. So they kind of, not quite in order, but there is sort of a sequence to them. We need the hardware, we need the compute power, and we need massive networking. Virtual platforms, I feel that's kind of my space. I'll talk to you a bit about that, and interchange of tools and standards. So again, I'll talk a little bit about how the internet works, because I think we need to see that as a model for the metaverse. Literally going to skip payments, and then I think we can always be thinking about what is the content, what do you see, what can you do when you are in the internet, and then what sort of services and assets are in there. The most compelling argument against, or the most compelling objection, but reason raised why a lot of people say the metaverse won't come around or won't come about in the way that maybe I'm going to talk about just now. It's actually, I think the compelling one for me is user behaviours, how we act as humans. I think we're already, we've just spent 18 months, haven't we, in a box talking to each other through boxes on a screen. And I think most of us are super tired of this format, and we could be doing with a lot less of it. I think as we manage to have more face-to-face again, some of the value of that, I don't think we ever appreciated, and I think we can now quite tangibly appreciate and understand. So how do we envisage a world where I'm going to talk about where there's a 3D version of just about everything and you can tap into and teleport to other 3D places? I mean, are we going to strap big VR boxes to our face? Probably not, or not for any length of time. So I think there are some crucial, I mean, we talk a lot about UX in our business, user experience design. How do we make this feel superhuman, or not superhuman, but very convincingly, authentically human to have these experiences? I think that all of the other stuff is kind of technical, and people are working on it, and we can see timelines to the hardware and virtual platforms, etc. It's all coming. However, how we resolve the human part of this, I think, is a big unknown. Loads of people working on it. If I was looking around, I'd look at the likes of Apple, who have always cared down to the last pixel and the little audio beep, and everything about an Apple experience has been so carefully and thoroughly designed that I think they are maybe the model that a lot of us look to for the level of design and care that's going to have to go into the user experience design for all aspects of the metaverse. So I'll skip past, there's various words on a lot of these slides here. Certainly if you want to read back, you get into a bit of detail. Hardware, we need the stuff, we need the hardware. I spoke earlier about glasses, but if we're going to enter the metaverse, we're going to need things that surround us. We can do projection, we do some projected systems that you can project into a dome and stand within. The glasses are getting lighter and lighter, so that hardware is coming. Facebook themselves, massive investors in this space with the Oculus headset. I think we're just assuming that some of the internet type stuff, the GPUs and everything else will be there. We just need to scale what we have. It's the new hardware that's coming that will enable this. Networking, you'll hear a lot about 5G, you might know a lot about 5G. That's the kind of new networking standard where it's super low latency. And again, as well as needing a lot of bandwidth to shift a lot of data around, latency is vital to deliver truly synchronous real-time experiences. If we were playing a game and I was to, I don't know, throw a ball to you in a shared space in the metaverse, for you to catch it, the latency between us or me and the server and each other needs to be tiny. So some other things are not so crucial latency-wise, but many are. So networking, but again, it's coming. 5G is coming. There's 5G test beds up and running. It's well proven. It just needs to scale. Compute. So most aspects of the metaverse are effectively a big 3D world. The data that feeds them might well be raw data from the AEC sector. So if we start thinking about Revit data sets and the many gigabytes of 3D data for one building, we have every building, if we have every street, if we have every mountain, if we have every space on Earth in 3D at high resolution, we can start to multiply the numbers, get insane for the volume of data and the volume of processing required, the amount of compute. Now again, we're seeing not exponential, but colossal scaling of data centers that provide remote compute, the cloud. And I think that space, we are beginning to see people talking about, I think there already are some out at sea, underwater, using natural cooling. I think there's talk about building data centers in space. So I think the scale of compute that will be required is enormous. I'll come back to virtual platforms because we'll spend a bit of time talking about that. Interchange tool and standards, again, I'll maybe talk a little about this. So those of us, probably many people in this call just now, have come from a world where BIM is often discussed, building information modelling. I've been around that space for more than 10 years now. In fact, even my final year design project in the mid-90s at uni, we were kind of talking about 3D data shared with 3D models with data attached. So the concept's been around for a long time. I would argue that two things. One, on the positive side, our entire industry's adopted 3D almost universally for any size of project. However, I would think the BIM side, the data side, has been talked about. The standards are written, UK government have led, Scottish government do a lot as well. We are internationally renowned, I think, for our kind of quality of implementation and our standards around BIM, and the UK standards are used globally. However, it's not really been leveraged for its value yet. I don't think we've really seen. And we talk about interoperability. I mean, I'm not going to go there, but IFC, Kobe, or do we still share PDFs? Do we get to the end of a project and print out a bunch of PDFs and we kill all of the data and we kill all of the 3D and that becomes the deliverable in a project? So that idea of standards and interoperability we have wrangled with, not failed, but just not developed very fast, and probably 10 years of pushing hard. So again, if we just scale that up to everything, so all of the world being available in a metaverse, every business being in the metaverse, all the trading around the world being done in the metaverse, the idea of achieving that requires incredible work on standards. If we think about the internet, think back to whenever it sort of developed. I mean, I guess the concept was developed in the 60s, kind of came to life late 80s and 90s. And what really happened was it was a bunch of academics and various others who, for the greater good, I think genuine attempts at the greater good, developed a wide set of standards. They formed the W3 committee, which still runs to this day. They have some things to say about the metaverse at the moment, it's quite interesting, but they continue to maintain the HTML and other standards of the internet, the protocols that allow any computer anywhere to talk to another one. The fact that we can use any browser, any device to access a website and we'll one way or another get a similar information set, that is actually an incredible achievement. And bear in mind, this is not driven by a commercial company or even a country in terms of standards. So law is really interesting in a space where it's pan-national. However, just to go back again, the idea that we can interoperate around the whole internet, we have done for 25 years, almost seamlessly. There was a few attempts at the beginning. I think Yahoo, CompuServe and a few others tried to create their own internet where they kept all their own content in their own format and you had to buy into their world. But that was just swept away by the scale and volume of available information. And of course, we see things like app stores, which are somewhat closed gardens. However, to think of this then in the metaverse, the challenge is huge because these are new formats. We can't, well, people have tried to create a virtual HTML. There's VRML as a virtual reality markup language. That was a clear attempt to directly lift the standards of the internet and apply them into VR at least, but or the wider metaverse. But there's so much more to be done, and I think it's a really important topic. Payments, again, I'll skip. It's just to be clear that we already see it within games now. There's fully live economies and things like Fortnite. So fully digital currencies and new forms of payment and value exchange are going to come along with the metaverse. User behaviours, I think I've covered this, but we shouldn't underestimate the difficulty and the challenge in designing something that we as humans will naturally enjoy using. It took us, I don't know, 5 or 6 or 7 years from, let's say, the first smartphone, and it was really Apple coming along with the iPhone 3-4 years later to make it a nice, simple to use experience. You didn't need to be a kind of smart person, not a smart person, but a smart devices sort of familiar person to use it. My parents, all sorts of people, tiny kids will now pick up particularly an Apple device, but most smart devices, and be able to use it within a few seconds. So that level of design has to apply here. To jump sort of inspirations or sort of sources of information here. So this comes from Magic Leap, the now somewhat changed tech company. They raised $2.5+ billion in startup funding and VC funding to launch their glasses. They kind of launched their glasses. We have some, we're one of the few companies that do, and they kind of didn't really live up to their own hype. However, Ronnie Abovitz, the founder and original CEO, I think he speaks extremely well about, now they of course tried to coin the phrase themselves, not meta, but Magicverse. I think if you listen to Ronnie talk these days, he's back to Metaverse. But I think this idea of layers, this idea of digital layers, I think is really useful, particularly for us in our sector to think about. So we have the physical world, we can look around us, we can walk down the street, we can climb up a mountain. There's a physical real world, of course, there's the real world. Then there will and already is beginning to be a digital replica, a digital twin of that world. So there's a digital version onto which, and it talks about base layers at the bottom there, onto which we can start to drop services and we can start to drop applications. So if we then think about mobility, now again, if any of you spend much time travelling in some of the bigger cities like London, it's quite a different experience than it is maybe for me in my home city of Glasgow. With an Apple Watch or with any form of credit card, I can just wander onto any public transport. Everything's signed to be connected. I can use Google or some other city mapper app, and these things guide you to where you need to be, give you 5 options, sort of help you out with weather, show you where there are delays, they'll reroute you instantly if there's a problem. All of that stuff around mobility is already kind of there, but it's there in a 2D form. It's not really there in 3D. And the idea of being able to also in tall buildings navigate your way internally in a tall building or navigate internally in a large campus, large university or a large commercial campus. Those things tend to be off grid a little at the moment because Google hasn't been there, but that will change rapidly so that all forms of mobility will be delivered. Everything around energy and water, I'll skip into these, health and wellness, communications, and I guess the one that's assumed to be the kind of starter gun, the initial industry of the metaverse is entertainment, because we have games, we have 3D games that look very much like a lot of the things I'm talking about in terms of metaverse. But I guess it's all those others that maybe won't be gamified, but will take the same power of games engines and provide this sort of virtual or augmented experience. So I think some of the stuff, and again, you can find talks by Ronnie Abovitz, and super interesting guy. And again, looking at our industry, IoT, so the Internet of Things, I think we all know now, if we take the world of service engineering, all manner of equipment that's built into the kind of infrastructure and services of buildings and cities. If we go to city scale, tiny sensors, sub $1 each, are now able to report back their status, the flow in a pipe, traffic issues, flood, temperature, etc., etc. So that idea of having a network, a hugely growing network, billions and billions of devices very soon, reporting back the status of a building, underground, the air quality. So that live sensoring as a clear feed is a really important feed into a city digital twin or a building digital twin, which then ultimately can be experienced through the metaverse. Connected systems, GIS for data capture, and then the design of those interfaces back to that human piece. How do we access this stuff? Because it's all very well for it to be there. Do I need to boot up an app on my phone? Well, probably not. We'll probably start to have glasses, or maybe it'll be audio delivered and it'll be more contextual, it'll be more human. There's a load of talk about HCI, human computer interfaces. We talk about GUIs, or have done for years, graphical user interfaces. There's huge work into NUI, so natural user interfaces. So the idea of using, swipe, but in the air, using our voice. We're all now used to talking to Alexa at home, I guess, most of us are. Then that idea of voice control is just, again, coming from left field, a super convenient device at home. But now we're used to it and we've learned how to interact with a computer system. In fact, pretty much the entire internet is available to us through our voice and Alexa. So those interfaces, I think we'll learn from a variety of sources how to apply those and access this colossal data set. We'll skip through this very quickly. So that's just a bunch of pointers for things that are happening. Some of them, I think several in the last 2 weeks have just popped up. So it's very hot and it's moving very fast at the moment. Epic Games, so the guys that make Fortnite, they have released about 2014, I think we built a bunch of Radisson hotels, then went on to build Spurs, Tottenham Hotspur football stadium, and a whole lot of other projects. At Solus, we delivered these things in the Unreal Engine, so the exact technology that delivers these games, delivers Fortnite, if you're into these things, Rocket League, that engine's freely available to use, so it's free. There's a massive pool of talent globally of Unreal and games developers, and we can now leverage something that is a super mature platform. I mean, I was playing Unreal Tournament in the mid-90s, so this is a 25+ year mature platform, but we can now use it for everything in our industry, but also everything, or soon to be everything, in our everyday lives. And with that in mind, the kind of founder, Tim Sweeney, has been talking a lot for the last 5+ years about the metaverse, the coming metaverse, and how a games engine like Unreal will be the basis, or will be one of the foundation layers, of that metaverse. And they've raised loads, actually a lot more than the $1 billion they've raised recently, expressly to fund their moves into the metaverse. I think of all the CEOs and leaders out there, I definitely need to declare I've always been an Epic fanboy. I've got a lot of time for how they operate. But if you listen to Tim Sweeney speak consistently over, all those years, he is about open interchange, about not being one company owning it. He's tried, I don't know if it was entirely for the cameras or for the PR, but took a massive battle to Apple recently around the fees in the stores. And he's trying to change that aspect of the world to enable more interoperability and more open exchange. Again, so Niantic, yet another what we would have considered a games company. These are the guys that made Pokemon Go. So whenever it was 4 or 5 years ago, I remember being in London and you just seen hordes of people running around together on their devices, chasing little virtual Pokemon around cities and parks and all this stuff. Again, seen as a bit of a fad. It had the Pokemon brand attached to it. However, what were Niantic actually doing? They were mapping the world. They were mapping the world through those devices. And then now, a few weeks ago, I think this is some of the news, a couple of weeks ago, they have launched Lightship, which they are calling their ARDK. So again, those of us in the tech world will know SDK, software development kit. It's the idea of getting access to someone else's technology through a kind of portal or through a set of protocols. They've released their AR, augmented reality developer kit, to enable anyone to create apps and experiences on their metaverse. So where they have started to map the world, you can now use their technology to do things. So they've flipped from being a games company to being a platform where any of us can go and use their technology. They're not the only people making that transition. We have, of course, Zuck. And again, this is a slide from only a few months ago, already massively out of date. But he, I think, again, to be fair to him, has always talked about it not being one company, about being open, about interoperability. Now, that does fly in the face of some of our own experiences with Facebook over the years. However, they do talk in the right way about it, and they are clearly massively now invested because we have Meta. Facebook has been relegated to a product, and the company is now Meta. And of course, I don't know, we're going to sit in the moon and hang out with our other halves or something. But the idea that one of the biggest companies in the world, one of the most influential tech companies in the world, is pushing everything they have into the metaverse space should tell us that this is not a fad, that this is no small passing trend. This is a step change in our access to technology, or the technologies that we'll access. Within days, I think 2 days later, Microsoft released a big update to Teams, where they're using their mesh technology to deliver virtual avatars. I think it's widely been, this is the FT's coverage, widely seen as a much smaller step forward than Meta and Facebook are trying to take. But again, in that direction, they are clearly moving to create virtual worlds where we can work together, where we can collaborate, and some of their films are about virtual whiteboard sessions, etc. That stuff's happening already. We do that in Edify as a teaching and training platform. We have multiple people sharing a space to learn and train, whereas I think Microsoft see this as this broad thing across all businesses. You may or may not know the company Nvidia, but odds are that if you have any form of PC, I think more than half of the graphics cards in the world come from Nvidia, the graphics chips. So the things that drive 3D games come from Nvidia. And they made a move, I think about a year ago, to launch what they call Omniverse. Again, just another play. Again, look, they've got a TM on there. They're trying to create some branded naming around this. But they have then partnered with Pixar, who created the USD format, the Universal Scene Description format. That's really interesting because that's an attempt to look at a truly open and universal single format that describes a 3D space. So if we're used to all the 3D file formats in our industry, if we then look at automotive, if we look at GIS, if we look at energy, if we look at all these different industries, manufacturing, they all have generally proprietary 3D formats, the files that we all create. However, Pixar have created this universal scene description, which just about anything can be converted into, and it's very, very interesting. So between the hardware guys who create the graphics cards and Pixar, there's a very big push, and we've seen already, I'll skip forward to my friend Cobus. So don't know if you track some of the bigger architecture firms, but Cobus and the team at KPF have always been kind of pioneers in the 3D front. This was Cobus Inc. last week at Nick's Build. That video is there to be found. I would highly encourage you to go and watch it. He presented what they'd done during 18 months of global pandemic, where they fast-tracked a lot of work they were doing, particularly using that USD format and the Omniverse technology from Nvidia. And he showed live, I think, 2 remote users in different locations, effectively at home, using Rhino, someone else using Revit. The 3 models were then shared in a Omniverse sort of collaborative space, and then all sorts of other people could directly interact, touch things, move things in that collaborative model, which would then feed back out to the Rhinos and the Revits that created them. So definitely something that looks a lot like a collaborative metaverse space for our industry in terms of architecture. These guys are working on kind of city scale or large scale projects, so we can then begin to think, what would it look like if all aspects of our industry, if all the structures and all the services and everything was in there? What does it look like to have that virtual meeting where we don't need local power? So I'm sitting on an average Mac laptop at the moment. I could dial into that session in the same way as I've dialed into this Teams call and take part and touch things in 3D and move them, because the compute is sitting in the cloud somewhere, it's delivered by fast networking, and all I really need is a kind of browser type interface, and I'm part of that. So how am I doing for time? I'll stop shortly and open up to questions. Unity, the other big games engines, we have Unreal and Unity, effectively a choice of 2 platforms that are very similar. There's not a lot to pick between them. I probably favour Unreal for many things these days, but Unity's always been that slightly lighter weight, probably got a bigger developer community, and historically has cross-platform published. So Apple, PC, but onto all your devices, Android, iOS, the publishing out from Unity has always been really neat, cross-platform, and you tended to have to be a bit more hands-on with Unreal to get it to do what you want it to do. But 2 very similar platforms, also free and colossal business with many, many millions, probably billions of users. Matterport, just another one worth looking at. You may well know, for years and years, heavily funded Silicon Valley startup who created these scanning 360 cameras. You put it in the middle of the room, or you walk around and you capture the space around you, like a really, really simple LiDAR scan. However, very recently, again, last week, I think, or the week before, they launched Matterport for Android, and it's coming soon for Apple devices as well. So they've taken the hardware out of the picture. This is now just an app. This is now just on your phone, and you point it around and you capture the world around you. That's a pretty spectacular shift from even a few years ago, where you needed dedicated and expensive hardware and probably a skilled operator to do that. You know, everybody's talking about it. That's Verizon. Definitely go and try and catch Cobus's talk. This is one that I'll play, and then I'll just wrap. I'll just jump to the end and then start taking questions. So this to me is next gen. So this is called Nerf. Neural radiance fields or something. Yeah, okay, the words are there, I should have read them. Neural radiance fields. But the idea here is this is an uncontrolled photo collection. They went on to, I think, Tumblr and various Flickr and various sources of images online for places. They just pumped a whole load of random photographs into their cloud system. This is Google, guys at Google doing some cutting edge research. And if I play this, I won't play it all, but I'll let the first read.
In this work, we present Nerf in the Wild, an extension of neural radiance fields, or Nerf, photo collection of some scene, in this case, the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, and produces as output novel images of that scene where the camera can be moved, and also the appearance of the scene can be changed. Let's start off by just looking at some view synthesis results from our system.
That model,
the 6 scenes from the phototourism dataset
entirely
used in all of our
from random photographs and no human intervention. That's mind-blowing.
You can see that we're able to produce high quality renderings of novel views of
The
these
other thing
scenes
is
using
every
only
light-
unstructured image collections as input.
Don't want to talk over this guy who's the expert in the space. I'm going to try and jump if I can't find it.
Images have likely been taken at different times,
Yes,
so the
different
weather
times of
might
day,
change or the
different
sun might
lighting.
move, and they could have different kinds of post-processing applied to them. Also, people generally don't take photographs of landmarks in isolation. There might be people posing
Auto
with the camera,
remove all
or
the
pedestrians are
foreground. And then
So here
end up,
two inputs we against
I
the,
don't know if I can find,
and because volumetric density is parameterized separately from emitted radiance in our network,
look at,
we can modify
so
the appearance of the
we
scene
can
while
now
guaranteeing
from
that the
any
geometry
view
doesn't change.
switch
like you
to
see here.
any lighting condition from the.
Our model doesn't just
set.
recover a single model of the scene, but is instead modeling the appearance.
I've kind of been talking about this for years.
In this work, we
but it's
present
some kind of weird aspirational future thing. It's kind of there and it works. I think there's a Git repository for anyone that's super techie and geeky, and you can go and take a look at the project live. I won't do too much in this. We all know Autodesk. They attempt to define digital twins from level 1. Is there a level 1? Don't know, but descriptive twin, just a 3D model really, up to these fully autonomous, self-perpetuating, data-filled, truly virtual replicas of an asset of a building or up to a city, possibly even country scale. I'll skip this stuff. If you're really interested, I can come back to it. This is the kind of tail end of our research into augmented worker. We are
the advanced manufacturing.
no, this one, sorry guys. But that's tunnels at Crossrail, the idea of being able to wear glass and, you know, with a pinch and fresh air, touch an object and pull down all available information about that object into your line of view. There's a whole lot of societal, moral, legal challenges coming at us. It's actually my brother, who was the kind of academic half of the Project Mobius. He's a philosopher and talks a lot about the morality and the societal challenges that we will face when the metaverse starts to appear around us. Huge dilemmas, huge issues to be dealt with there. And that's a mostly fun, but really interesting, somewhat dystopian movie. Again, I'll share all the links stuff all down here. Hyperreality.co if you want to watch that. Somewhat dystopian take on what a metaverse might look like. I'll stop there. I'm conscious I want to leave as much time as I can for questions, but thank you for listening. And if I can come out of here, I should be able to get back to the chat window and see what we have by way of questions. I don't think I've got the full chat, so I don't know if someone can share. Here we go. How do you plan to achieve this while efficiently using customers' data? That was up near the top there, and respecting their privacy, and what will make them trust you with the responsibility of such a level of data? Massive concern, definitely. Data, right? Facebook and some of the data challenges we've all seen recently, that's problematic for sure. If we also think about the business models at play, I know there's a lot of concern in the AEC industry at the moment around the BIM providers, the bigger BIM providers. Obviously there's Autodesk, there's Bentley, there's others. And do they store your data about your project? And how do you access that? What if you want to move to another platform? Can you? So I don't have answers, frankly, but if we think about the internet, we think about interoperable, we think about open standards, then maybe that's a much, much better model than these proprietary formats and walled gardens where things are held. But again, health data, financial data, the level of rigor around holding on to that and managing those data sets is going to have to be spectacular. There's a really good TED talk, TEDx Glasgow talk by Gillian Docherty, who until very recently was CEO of Scotland's Data Lab, sort of government-funded data organisation. She actually, I think, brought her daughter onto the stage and did the TED talk, and she was really positing what we're going to do in 20, 30 years' time when my daughter's my age and all of her data is available on the internet. She talked about a private data locker where all of our individual data lives in one place that we own and only we have access to, and we give and revoke rights for other people to access our data. We're a long way from there at the moment. All of our data is everywhere and held by all sorts of people. So I do think that's a key thing that we'll need to resolve soon. How do we engage more people in the use of the metaverse for engineering when there are still skepticism about metaverse, or people that are saying that it's unnatural? Yeah, I think there are various good access points. I mean, the thing I remember is back in the day, trying to pick the year, probably 2009, I think we'd been commissioned to create, I don't know, some apps or something, or some interactive pieces for a senior management team at one of the big construction companies. And there was no, they weren't technology people, they weren't interested in engaging in technology, they just didn't care, and it wasn't their thing. That Christmas, or whichever year it was the year that the iPad was launched. Most of the senior management got iPads for their Christmas, and within 3 months they had told their IT team that they were no longer PC, they were going to be iPad people, and now almost instantly through a consumer interaction, something that was really beautifully designed and easy to use, they were now familiar instantly with the technology. I kind of feel that that might happen here. I think there will be things in entertainment, there'll be things in our everyday lives that we'll adopt. I talked about Alexa earlier. I think Alexa's just quietly become normal. It's still pretty weird, right? There's a microphone running in a lot of our houses listening to everything that we say, but somehow or another we've just begun to trust that, and I think that consumer use of technology will then bleed its way into this space. The unnatural piece, I just agree. I think it requires incredible design and a period of familiarity. There's also a coming generation. If we're willing to wait 20 years, there's a generation coming through where all things digital natives, gaming is just everyday and normal. And I think as that generation comes through, and I'm probably very much older, but just happen to be super geeky end of that generation that's coming through, I'm very comfortable in all things 3D, well, obviously from my background, but there is a community of about my age generation, and then everything else coming behind us. Develop metaverse for education purposes. Okay, that's my space, that's what we're doing. I think there are so many opportunities. I think it's one of the earliest wins we can all have using virtual technologies to learn in expensive to reach places, dangerous places, and remotely collaboratively. We've been forced into a remote collaborative world over the last 18 months. It's proven in many ways we can do it. But now if we want to go on site, either as a collaboration team on a project or take a bunch of students, engineering students, into a set of ducts or into a half-built building, we can have just flown a drone the day before and we can give them a live visit. We can probably do it, ultimately we can do it live. We can virtually visit a thing, we can touch a thing, we can peel apart and open a thing. And I think the opportunities for education are colossal. So that's what we're doing at Edify. We're creating an open platform where anyone can create their own lessons. You bring in your own data, be that sort of AC data or any other form of data, and you deliver a lesson to a group of students, or you collaborate in a virtual space. I think it's one of the early big wins. Thank you for those questions, and sorry if I scanned through them too quickly. How do you think the multiverse will combine, be interoperable in the future? How will Facebook work with others, Decentraland, Sandbox? So yes, so that's some of the kind of more open platforms that are effectively trying to showcase another way to do things rather than signing into your Facebook account to access Facebook services. Is there an open, decentralised version of this coming? Well, I very much hope so. I think there are big players like Tim Sweeney and others who will push for that. But you also got to consider what national governments might think of some of that. I think the regulatory world, governments and around the world have still not caught up with what the internet is. Watch some of the congressional hearings where Zuckerberg and others have been interviewed. The level of question that comes from people creating the laws in the USA is frankly terrifying, that there's just no knowledge there for what the internet even is, never mind this kind of evolved 3D version. So we maybe, if we're hopeful and positive and we believe in the quality of our common man and our fellow man, then maybe we hope that the people around the world will develop something in an open, interoperable format, somewhat utopian, idealised hope. But I feel that's kind of what happened with the internet, and I think there is an opportunity to do that again. There's several metaverses in one location, here in London, and the majority of them will be redundant as a consequence. Yes, so I think in the early stages of creating something new and as big and as meta, overarching as this, then there will be false starts and there'll be various versions, and there will be attempts at walled gardens. I think hopefully we'll see, I mean, we might end up with a format war. If you're as old as me, you'll remember Betamax and VHS. You know, the less good format won. Sony won with better marketing over the better technology, which was Betamax. So we've got to hope that we won't end up in a proprietary format and a proprietary system, that it's somehow more open and interoperable in the way that I described earlier. But I think we may well have some false starts. Did the AI technology build itself, the entire 3D models? I believe so. Nerf, I can share all the links at the end, well worth a look at that. And they talk about the process, the inputs and how it all works, processed in the cloud. I think it's entirely AI generated. How accessible and secure would the data in the metaverse be in the context of construction project lifecycle application? So that's a live challenge just now, right? So we work on some of the biggest projects in the world with some very sensitive data sets. And often, we would always, or maybe we've seen it, they're not as secure as they could be sometimes in terms of how they're shared. We still see things shared on, I don't know, WeTransfer or something. So I think we have a data challenge anyway, and I think it just scales up X times. So we need to get the principles of data ownership, data, sort of serving data. There's a whole lot of interesting things about only being able to access the data you need at the time that you need it, and that you no longer have access to it any other time. So there's loads of these protocols being developed. However, yes, they'll absolutely need to be in place and robust for the metaverse to operate well. How am I doing for time? 7 more minutes. Let's see how we do it. Do you see this as developing like BIM, where governments will need to force it through various forms of mandates, or do you see the industry adopting it due to either wow factor or getting value from it? Forced through mandates is a nightmare. It's the worst way to try and do anything. However, I kind of feel as that is what was successful in the UK. That is how, I mean, if we work out, some of us work internationally, there's international people in the call. I think if you look around the world, the UK, maybe Scandinavia, or Singapore are seen as pioneers of BIM. And I do feel as if it was the government mandate for level 1, 2, 3 BIM and all this stuff that was pushed out, soft landings, all of that stuff. I think it did create the framework. And then, of course, if you're in any form of government funded project, you are required to be at level 2 BIM. So a bit of a stick. I don't think was anyone ever fined? Was any clawback in a project because BIM wasn't implemented correctly? I don't think so. But I just think it's a bit like the speed limit. If you set the rules and the framework on best practice, mostly people come along and join and follow through. So that has worked. I don't think so. I think this is too big. It's too far beyond our industry. I think we talk a lot and have been talking about digital twins. I think we look to automotive and aerospace, who've been using digital twins for many, many years successfully. We wondered, I think, for many years about adopting best practice from those parallel industries, and people have tried. However, I kind of feel as if it will go the other way now. I think the world has moved fast around us, and we are now going to see the biggest companies in the world funding huge R&D into this space, at which point our everyday lives will become more and more metaverse enabled, and it will become more and more normal and natural for us then to apply it. So I think the best way to see significant adoption and getting is to see value from it. It's maybe not quite the dollars at the bottom of the P&L profitability, but it's kind of that, as if you can demonstrate it in the boardroom for value, then all of a sudden you have buy-in across a company. Crystal ball gazing is a fool's game, and I've done a lot of it and get it wrong every time. So take all of that with a pinch of salt, of course. Lastly, what's the biggest ethical issues that you see arising from its application? I'll share the links. My brother's talk, I think he did 2 actually, a pair of them. We do a thing called a fireside chat every few Thursdays. We broadcast it, record it, and then share it on Vimeo. So 2 1-hour talks from him on that subject. And it's fascinating, and I have a little discussion with him at the end. I'm somewhat out my depth, but it's really interesting he talks about autonomy and how do we truly know. I can see a chair sitting over here next to me. Well, when it's rendered so beautifully and it's always there, maybe that chair's not there in real life, and what does that now mean for decisions that I make, etc., etc., etc. So there's lots of that stuff. There's loads of people thinking about it. Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, came to Glasgow a number of years ago. My brother was lucky enough to meet him at the University of Glasgow. All they talked about was that kind of morality and philosophy of humans in a virtual or augmented world in the future, the metaverse. So most of the big tech companies do care about it. Maybe they care about it for other reasons, but that idea of autonomy in a virtual space is, I say, well covered by others, but I'll share the links. We've heard about Facebook and Microsoft's investment in the metaverse. Is there any public information about Alphabet, Apple, and other tech giants investing in their own equivalent? Yeah, loads. So Tim Cook is on record talking about the future of Apple as AR, which is it's talking kind of about the device and the technology, but AR is the window into the metaverse for sure. They have been buying companies. They've bought all sorts of companies in this space. They've been hiring all the talent. I can't remember how many patents. Their patents are on record. There's really interesting sort of tech journalists troll for Apple's patents all the time. There are hundreds of AR glass type patents for Apple. So they are doing what they do. They wait, I think, a little bit for a level of maturity in a space, and then they'll come. I hope they bring awesome design and ease of use so that when people adopt it, it's a good experience. I think that'll open it up for everyone else to follow. Alphabet, yeah, I mean, what did Google do? Well, Google Maps. Google have been mapping the world for a very long time. I think also Apple cars, I don't think they care about building cars. I think they care about the fact that cars can map the world. Uber's not a ride-sharing taxi replacement service. I really don't think so. Uber probably have the most complete live data set for our roads and our cities in the world. Every single Uber car reports back every bump in the road, every blocked road, everything about itself. And as soon as those cars become autonomous and they have cameras mapping the world around them, Uber might have the most complete up-to-date live map of the world anywhere. That's super powerful. So those investments, maybe they're not like hard cash investments in new technology, more they are creating businesses which will facilitate the metaverse. Google had Glass. Google invested, I think, several hundred million in Magic Leap. So all of those, the direction of travel is pretty clear. Okay, thank you. Sorry if I've spoke a bit quickly, just trying to handle all the questions at the end there. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you all. I'm more than happy to share links to most of what was in my talk there. And again, hit me up, and very happy to answer questions or direct you to some other sources of interesting stuff. Thank you. Do you want to wrap up, Jeremy, or is that us? I think you're on mute there, Jeremy. Yeah.
Yeah, just first of all, obviously, thank you very much, Martin. It was quite a stimulating talk and given us all, I think, a lot to think about and hopefully not worry about more. Let's say, looking forward to the future opportunities that could or will almost certainly be coming our way. So, so thanks again. And just to say that we do have one more seminar coming up, or webinar, I should say. We're staying online for the time being on the 14th of December. It's entitled, it's about the chain of infection to do with water. So if you're interested in that topic, please go and register on the CIBSE webpage. Okay, well, thanks for that, and thanks for everybody who joined us. I hope you all found it interesting as well, and hopefully see you all again the next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care, guys. Cheers.
Bye.